The first time the young warrior saw the castle, he did not call it a fortress. He called it a wound in the world. It rose from the cliff like a black thought pushed up from the earth, Gothic spires and needle towers clawing at a bruised sky, walls so old they looked less built than grown. Lightning did not strike it. Lightning avoided it. The moon hung behind the highest turret like a watching eye, half veiled by fast-moving cloud, and the river below carried mist as if the land itself exhaled fear. His name was Kalen Vey, a son of no famous house, no shining prophecy. He had been born in a farming hamlet where legends were told only to make children sleep. Yet now he wore the evidence of war, dented plate armor with the crest scraped away, a cloak torn into hungry ribbons, leather straps darkened by rain and exhaustion. His face carried faint scratches, the kind earned not from ceremony but from survival. No blood though. He had learned early that blood invited attention in the borderlands. Behind him the forest shuddered. Not from wind. From something moving with intention. Kalen paused at the edge of the stone bridge leading to the castle gate. The bridge arched over a chasm that dropped into darkness so complete it looked like an absence rather than depth. Along the bridge's parapet, statues of hooded saints, long since eroded, leaned inward as if whispering prayers that had turned sour. He should not have been here. Everyone said so. The vampire realm of Noxvera, the kingdom of night, was not a place humans entered and returned from. But Kalen had not come because he wanted to. He had come because, 3 nights earlier, a riderless horse had collapsed at the village well with a broken saddle and a royal token fastened to its mane, silver filigree shaped like a thorned crown. His village elder had stared at it as if it were a grenade. "Throw it into the river," the elder had said, voice shaking. But Kalen had touched it and felt something like cold fire in his bones. The token was not a request. It was a summons. And with it came a whisper that seemed to curl through his thoughts when he tried to sleep. Find her. Save her. Or the border burns. He had tried to ignore it. He had tried to drink until his mind dulled. The whisper remained, patient as hunger. So now he stood on the bridge, staring at the castle gates, 2 slabs of iron engraved with archaic runes. Above them, a gargoyle grinned with fangs too real to be stone. Then the gates opened. Not dramatically. Not with a groan. They opened as if they had been waiting, as if the castle itself had recognized him. Warm candlelight spilled across the bridge in soft gold, and the scent of melted wax and old roses drifted out. Kalen's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. He stepped forward anyway. Inside the gate the world changed. The air became colder but cleaner, like winter inside a cathedral. Tall arches stretched overhead, and the corridor beyond was lined with stained glass windows depicting saints in crimson halos, except their halos were not gold but blood red. Moonlight poured through the glass in colored blades, cutting the mist that hugged the floor into ribbons of violet and scarlet. Kalen walked deeper, every footstep echoing too far. He passed suits of armor standing at attention, helmets bowed, their breastplates etched with noble names in a language he could not read. He passed tapestries showing battles between pale knights and human armies, each scene rendered with an artist's loving cruelty. He passed a candelabrum tall as a tree, flames flickering despite the absence of wind. And then midway down the hall he found the first body. A vampire guard, pale as marble, sprawled across the floor with his throat torn open. The blood was dark, almost black. The eyes were wide, shocked not by death, but by the manner of it, as if he had never believed anything could kill him here. Kalen knelt, touched the blood with a gloved finger. Cold. Something else lingered in the air, an animal stink and a metallic tang like rusted chains. He stood, drawing his sword. That was when the howl came. It echoed through the castle's bones, a long guttural sound that belonged to no wolf Kalen had ever hunted. The mist at his feet swirled as if disturbed by invisible wings. A second body appeared around the next corner. Then a third. Then a shattered door, splintered inward by something strong enough to treat oak like paper. Kalen moved cautiously, his breath fogging. He followed the trail of violence into a side chamber filled with broken furniture and overturned candlesticks. Here, blood smeared the walls in frantic arcs. A chandelier lay in pieces like a fallen constellation. And in the center of the destruction was a claw mark, gouged deep into the stone floor. 5 curved trenches, each as long as Kalen's forearm. He heard breathing. Not his. He turned. At the far end of the chamber, half hidden behind a collapsed column, a figure crouched, slender, pale, trembling. Silver hair fell across her face in disordered strands. Her eyes glowed red, not with the steady command of a predator but with panicked heat. A young woman. A vampire. Her dress, once elegant, was torn at the hem and stained with dust. Her hands were braced on the stone as if she had been thrown there and had only barely caught herself. Around her throat hung a small pendant shaped like a crescent thong. The air between them tightened like a drawn bowstring. Kalen did not lower his sword. He did not raise it further either. The vampire girl stared at him, chest rising and falling too fast. Her lips parted, revealing fangs, sharp but small. Not fully matured. Not yet the monster humans feared in bedtime stories. She tried to speak. Only a ragged sound came out. Behind Kalen something moved. A shadow at first. Then a shape. A creature unfolded itself from the darkness near the ceiling. Something like a wolf and something like a man, but wrong in both directions. Its limbs were too long, joints bending the way joints shouldn't. Its skin was leathery, stretched over corded muscle, and its mouth opened too wide, revealing layers of teeth like broken glass. Its eyes were not red. They were empty, milky white, blind yet perfectly aware. The creature dropped to the floor without a sound. The vampire girl made a small, terrified noise. Kalen understood instantly. She had been hunted inside her own home. He didn't have time to wonder why. He planted his feet, sword forward, and the creature lunged. The impact was thunder. Kalen's blade met the creature's claws, sparks bursting in the candlelight. The creature shrieked, high, furious, almost human, and shoved with inhuman strength. Kalen's boots slid across the stone, scraping. He felt his shoulder scream. He twisted, barely avoiding a bite that would have taken his face. The jaws snapped shut inches from him, teeth clacking like wet knives. He slashed upward. Steel bit into flesh. Black blood sprayed across his armor in hot arcs, then cooled instantly as if it belonged to a corpse. The creature staggered but did not fall. It moved like pain was a concept it found insulting. It swung again. Kalen ducked, rolled, felt claws rake his backplate and tear a strap loose. He came up near the vampire girl. She was watching with wide eyes, frozen between survival instinct and royal training. "Run," Kalen said, voice harsh. She didn't. The creature lunged for her instead. Kalen's body reacted faster than his mind. He stepped into the path, took the blow, claws ripping across his chest plate, denting it inward. The force stole his breath, pain blooming. He tasted iron, but he refused to collapse. He drove his sword into the creature's side, aiming for what would be a heart in something shaped like a man. The blade went in and hit bone. Not ribs, something harder like stone. The creature screamed, grabbed the sword with one clawed hand and wrenched. Kalen held on. For a heartbeat, warrior and monster were connected by steel and hatred. The vampire girl finally moved. Not away. She rose, eyes burning brighter, and in a voice that sounded far older than her face she whispered a word that made the candles flicker. A thin line of crimson light snapped across the creature's neck like a thread drawn taut. The creature froze. Kalen didn't hesitate. He yanked his sword free and swung. The head hit the floor with a wet, heavy sound. Silence dropped like a curtain. Kalen stood over the corpse, chest heaving. His armor was crushed in one place, his cloak shredded further. His hands shook with the aftermath of adrenaline. The vampire girl stared at the decapitated monster, then at Kalen. "You," she said, voice hoarse. "You are human." "Yes," Kalen said. "And you saved me." "I did what anyone would do," he lied because he knew most humans would have run. Her gaze lowered to his dented armor, the scratches on his face, the way he still stood between her and the dead thing even after it was dead. Something in her expression shifted, an emotion too complex to name. Not gratitude alone. Not suspicion. Recognition. As if the castle, the whisper, the bodies and Kalen's arrival were parts of a single plan coming into focus. "What is your name?" she asked. "Kalen." "My mother will want to meet you," she said softly, as if the words were both promise and doom. Kalen swallowed. Meeting a vampire queen was not on his list of survivable decisions. Yet as the vampire girl stepped closer, moonlight catching in her silver hair, Kalen felt the strange whisper in his mind quiet, like a beast that had finally been fed. And far away, deeper in the castle, a bell began to toll, slow and heavy, announcing not a death, but a change. They did not walk through the castle like fugitives. They walked like escorted survivors. The vampire girl, who introduced herself at last as Seraphine Valenker, daughter of the queen, moved with a stiffness that suggested she had been taught Grace's armor. Yet her hands trembled when she thought Kaelin wasn't watching. She kept glancing at the shadows as if expecting them to grow teeth. Kaelin's instincts kept him alive. He watched the ceiling, the corners, the reflections in polished stone. Vampires loved mirrors, he'd heard, but the truth was worse. Some walls were so glossy they acted as dark mirrors, and in them Kaelin saw Seraphine's pale face twice, 3 times, like the castle was remembering her from multiple angles. As they moved, doors opened ahead of them without being touched. Vampire servants appeared, silent, elegant, eyes lowered. They did not speak to Kaelin, but they stared when they thought he wasn't looking. Their expressions held neither hostility nor welcome. It was curiosity. The kind reserved for a mouse that had somehow walked into a lion's court and refused to die. They reached the great hall. It was larger than the village square where Kaelin had grown up, vast enough to swallow armies. Stone pillars rose like petrified trees, their tops branching into ribbed arches. Hundreds of candles burned in wall sconces, the flames steady and bright as if protected from the world's laws. Mist drifted across the floor in slow tides, illuminated by moonlight pouring through stained glass windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. And at the far end stood the throne. Obsidian, black as deep water. Carved with thorns and roses, its back rising high like the spine of a dragon. It reflected candlelight in cruel gleams. Beside it stood a woman who made the hall feel suddenly smaller. The vampire queen of Noxvera. She was tall, regal, and impossibly composed, as if centuries had trained every muscle in her body to express authority without effort. Her gown was black and crimson, the fabric heavy with royal dignity, accented by silver ornaments shaped like fangs and lilies. Her skin was pale enough to glow, not in sickness but in cold magnificence. Her eyes were deep red and steady, the gaze of a creature who did not need to shout to be obeyed. One hand was raised slightly as if she had just been speaking, or had only paused to allow fate to arrive. Kaelin felt his throat tighten. He had faced bandits. He had faced war. He had faced the creature in the chamber. But the queen's presence was different. It was not violence. It was inevitability. Seraphine moved ahead of him and lowered herself into a formal kneel, head bowed. Kaelin did not kneel at once. Human pride flared, but the weight of the queen's gaze pressed him down like gravity. He knelt. "Mother," Seraphine said, voice steady now that she was near the throne. "This is the human." He intervened when the beast breached the inner halls. The queen's gaze shifted to Kaelin. He felt pinned, dissected, evaluated. The queen stepped forward. Her movement was slow, deliberate. Candlelight slid over her gown like liquid. Her feet made no sound on the stone, but the air changed with each step, as if the hall inhaled her authority. "You are wounded," she said. It was not a question. Kaelin's pride wanted to deny it, but his chest ached where the armor had been crushed. "Not badly." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly as if amused by the lie. "You killed one of the Holophong," she said. "In my halls." Kaelin looked up despite himself. "Holophong." Seraphine spoke quietly. "They are not of our kind. They are something older, twisted. They hunt us." The queen's lips tightened at the edges. "They hunt her," she corrected, nodding toward Seraphine. "They hunted my daughter." Kaelin's mouth went dry. "Why?" The queen did not answer immediately. Instead she walked closer until Kaelin could see the fine detail of her silver ornaments, tiny roses with thorns shaped like fangs. She smelled faintly of cold roses and iron. "You are not from a noble line," she said as if reading it off his bones. "You are not trained by any court. Yet you stepped between my daughter and death." Kaelin's voice came out rough. "I couldn't leave her." Something flickered in the queen's eyes, something like satisfaction, quickly buried. Then she lifted her hand and, without touching him, Kaelin felt a pressure in the crushed section of his armor. The dent eased outward with a soft metallic groan. The pain in his ribs diminished, like ice melting under sunlight. He gasped, startled. The queen turned her hand slightly, and the faint scratches on his face tingled, the skin knitting. She healed him with the casual precision of someone adjusting a crown. Kaelin stared at her, unsettled by the intimacy of it. The queen's voice lowered, and when she spoke next, the hall seemed to lean in to listen. "You have performed an act that changes the balance between our species." Kaelin's pulse quickened. I didn't. She lifted her hand again. Not to silence him. To declare. I am Queen Morvanna Valenker, sovereign of Noxvera, blood-bound of the Obsidian Throne. Her words struck like a gong. And then she said the sentence that Kalen would replay in his mind for the rest of his life. After saving my daughter, you will be my son-in-law human. The hall went still. Candles did not flicker. Mist did not move. Even the shadows seemed to pause. Kalen's mind emptied in shock. He looked at Seraphine, expecting outrage, denial, something. Seraphine's eyes widened, but she did not recoil. Instead, in her expression was a quiet terror of what this meant, and a strange, reluctant acceptance, as if this path had been haunted in her dreams long before it was spoken aloud. Kalen's mouth finally worked. Your Majesty, what? Queen Morvanna stepped back as if the decree was already law and no further explanation was necessary. You are not merely rewarded, she said. You are claimed. A human bonded to this throne becomes a bridge no one can burn without consequences. Kalen's stomach twisted. I didn't come here to be claimed. Morvanna's eyes sharpened. No. You came because something called you. Kalen froze. The whisper. The token. The sleepless nights. Morvanna tilted her head slightly, like a predator examining a new kind of prey. The Holofong do not breach my castle without reason, she said softly. Someone opened the way for them. Someone wishes my bloodline broken. Her gaze moved from Kalen to Seraphine, and for the first time the queen's mask cracked, just enough for Kalen to see the fear beneath it. Not fear for herself. Fear for her daughter. You will remain, Morvanna said, voice returning to steel. You will be guarded, tested, and prepared. If you refuse human, then you may leave. Kalen swallowed. And if I leave? Morvanna's smile was faint, cold, certain. Then you will not survive the road out. It was not a threat. It was a statement of the world's cruelty. Kalen looked down at his hands, still trembling from battle, now clean of blood but not of consequence. He had come to save someone. He had done that. But now, in one royal sentence, he had been pulled into a war older than his village, older than human kings. He raised his eyes again and met Seraphine's gaze. She was watching him, silent, safe and unharmed as the thumbnail scene promised, yet as trapped as he was. And in that moment, Kalen realized, the Queen's declaration was not only about marriage. It was about survival. About politics. About a kingdom that had decided to use his humanity like a blade. And the night outside the stained glass windows looked suddenly less like darkness, and more like an ocean waiting to swallow them all. Days passed in Noxvera without sunlight to count them. Kalen learned time differently, by candle wax, by the hunger in his stomach, by the shifting hue of moonlight through stained glass. The castle did not feel like a prison in the obvious way. Doors did not lock with iron. Guards did not chain him. Instead, the castle itself redirected him. A hallway would lengthen when he tried to walk it alone. A staircase would lead him back to the same landing. Mirrors would show him walking in directions he wasn't taking. The architecture was a polite cage. He was given a chamber with a fire that burned blue. A servant brought food, real food, human food, bread still warm, meat seasoned with herbs, wine that tasted like dark berries. Someone had thought about what a human needed to survive here. That someone, Kalen suspected, was Seraphine. They met often, though never without distance. Sometimes in the library, an enormous cathedral of books where ladders climbed shelves like spider legs. Sometimes in the training hall where vampire knights practiced with swords too elegant for slaughter. Sometimes in the glass garden, an indoor courtyard where black roses bloomed under moonlight and water flowed in a silent fountain. Seraphine spoke little at first. She watched him like he was a question she couldn't decide whether to ask. You don't have to do this, Kalen told her one night as they stood among the roses. Seraphine's eyes glowed softly, reflecting the fountain's moonlit ripples. Do you think I have a choice? He hesitated. Your mother, she declared it like law. Seraphine's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. My mother does not declare lightly. The throne is older than her, and its laws are older than the language we speak. When she says you will be her son-in-law, she is not only speaking as a queen. Kalen frowned. What else is she speaking as? Seraphine's gaze drifted to the rose thorns, dark and sharp. As a woman who is running out of moves. That night, Kalen began to understand. The decree was not a reward. It was a shield. But shields cut both ways. He trained. Not because he enjoyed it, but because he could feel the castle watching, testing whether he was worth the claim placed on him. Vampire instructors taught him to fight with speed rather than brute force, to read the slight tension in a shoulder before a strike. He learned new footwork, silent, efficient. His body bruised and healed. Morvanna visited the training hall twice. She never corrected him directly. She simply watched, and the air grew colder. In her presence, even vampire knights stood straighter. And Kaelin realized something unsettling. Morvanna was not only feared. She was revered. Her kingdom did not obey her because she forced them. They obeyed because they believed she was the only barrier between them and extinction. Meanwhile, whispers moved through the castle like rats. Kaelin heard servants murmuring in languages he didn't know. He saw nobles watching from balconies, eyes glittering with contempt and fascination. A human in the vampire court was unprecedented. A human marked as future consort, unthinkable. One evening, Seraphine finally told him what the Holophong were. They were born when the first vampires tried to make themselves immortal beyond death, she said in the library, fingers tracing the spine of an ancient tome. They used blood magic to bind souls to flesh. But the souls tore. The bodies remained. Hunger remained. And what crawled out of that ritual was not vampire. Kaelin swallowed. And they want you. Seraphine nodded. Because my bloodline is specific. My mother carries the throne blood, a pact with the obsidian throne itself. And I am her heir. Kaelin's chest tightened. So the Holophong want to break that pact. Seraphine's voice dropped. Someone is guiding them. Someone opened a gate into the inner halls. Someone in this castle. Kaelin felt the world shift. A traitor. Seraphine looked at him, and for the first time her eyes held something like trust. Yes. The castle, the court, the queen, everything was layered over a hidden war. And Kaelin, human outsider, was suddenly the most unpredictable piece on the board. Perhaps that was why Morvanna claimed him. Not because she needed a son-in-law, but because she needed a weapon no vampire could predict. The first assassination attempt came quietly. A goblet of wine placed at his bedside. Smelled of berries. He would have drunk it, if not for the way the blue fire in his hearth hissed when he brought the cup close. Kaelin poured a drop onto the stone. It smoked. Poison. He stared at the goblet for a long time, then carried it into the hallway and smashed it against the wall. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Servants appeared, pale faces unreadable. Seraphine arrived moments later, breathless. Are you hurt? She demanded. Kaelin shook his head. Someone wants me dead. Seraphine's jaw tightened. Or wants you gone. If you die, my mother's claim fails. The bridge collapses. Kaelin looked at her, the candlelight painting her face in dramatic shadows. Does your mother suspect anyone? Seraphine hesitated. She suspects everyone. Pause. Then quieter, including me. Kaelin stared. Seraphine's voice trembled. Because there are those in the court who would rather see the throne without my bloodline. They would rather see my mother weakened. And if they can make it appear that She couldn't finish. Kaelin stepped closer, lowering his voice. I don't think you're the traitor. Seraphine's red eyes lifted to his. In them was a storm of emotions. Fear, anger, exhaustion, and something softer she tried to hide. You shouldn't trust me, she whispered. I am vampire. Kaelin answered without thinking. And you were the one being hunted. Seraphine's breath caught at that. She looked away as if the words hurt. In that moment something changed between them. Not romance, not yet. Something more dangerous, alliance. A bond formed not by affection but by shared survival. And outside, beyond the stained glass, thunder rolled across the mountains like distant drums. The invitation arrived on black parchment sealed with crimson wax. A masquerade. A court ritual older than the kingdom's written history. Morvanna summoned Kaelin not as a soldier, not as a guest, but as her declared future kin. He was required to attend. The night of the masquerade, the throne hall transformed. Candles multiplied until the air shimmered with flame. Music drifted from unseen musicians, strings and low drums that felt like a heartbeat. The mist thickened, curling around dancers' feet. Nobles arrived in gowns like spilled ink and coats embroidered with silver thread. Masks glittered, bone white, obsidian black, jeweled crimson. Kalen stood at the edge, wearing a simple black mask given to him by a servant. It covered his eyes and cheekbones, leaving his mouth exposed. The mask smelled faintly of roses. He felt like a lamb invited to a feast. Seraphine entered late. She wore a gown of midnight blue that looked almost black until the light caught it. Silver filigree traced her shoulders like frost. Her mask was delicate, shaped like a crescent moon, leaving her red eyes visible, defiant, unapologetic. When she came to stand beside him, the crowd's attention shifted like a predator's focus. Whispers sharpened. Kalen could feel them. Human pet bridge bait. Seraphine's voice was low. "Do not drink anything," she murmured. "I already learned that lesson," Kalen replied. Seraphine glanced at him. "Tonight will be worse." At the far end, Queen Morvana sat upon the obsidian throne. She did not wear a mask. She did not need one. Her face was the law. The music swelled. Dancers moved. And then Morvana rose. The hall fell silent in waves. "My court," she said, voice carrying without effort. "Tonight we honor ancient custom. Tonight we acknowledge a debt paid in bloodless courage." Her gaze fell on Kalen. "He is human," Morvana continued, and the words tasted like scandal. "And yet he placed himself between my heir and the Holophong. Therefore, by right and by throne law, he is bound to my house." A murmur rippled, restrained but fierce. Morvana lifted her hand slightly. "Let those who object step forward." No one moved. Not because no one objected. Because to object openly was to invite the queen's wrath. Morvana's eyes glittered, satisfied. "Then let the masquerade continue." The music resumed, louder. But Kalen felt something. A tension in the air, subtle as spider silk. This was not merely celebration. This was a trap. Seraphine's fingers brushed his wrist briefly, a warning. "Stay close." They moved into the crowd. Vampire nobles approached with smiles too sharp to be friendly. A count with hair white as ash bowed to Kalen, mask shaped like a bat. "Human," he purred. "You must be honored." Kalen nodded stiffly. "I'm alive." The count's laugh was soft. "For now." A woman in a crimson gown circled Seraphine like a shark. Her mask was a porcelain doll's face cracked at the mouth. "Princess," she whispered sweetly. "You look well for someone who nearly died." Seraphine's voice was ice. "I look like someone who learned who her enemies are." The woman's smile faltered. Kalen's eyes scanned the hall. He noticed servants moving too quickly. He noticed a balcony shadow where someone watched without dancing. He noticed a priest-like figure in dark robes carrying a chalice that glowed faintly red. Then the lights dimmed. Not by candles going out, but by something swallowing the light. The music faltered, strings snapping into silence. A scream cut through the hall. Kalen turned and saw a vampire noble collapsing, clutching his throat. Black veins spread across his pale skin like ink in water. His mask fell, shattering. His eyes bulged. Poison. But not meant for Kalen. Chaos erupted as nobles backed away, some laughing nervously, others snarling accusations. Guards moved in, blades drawn. Morvana remained still, but her eyes were knives. The poisoned noble convulsed, then stilled. And from the balcony shadow something leaped. A Holophong, larger than the one Kalen had killed. It landed among the crowd, tearing through silk and bone. Another followed. Then another, dropping like nightmares given gravity. Panic became violence. Vampires were predators, but in a stampede they became animals. Some fled. Some fought. Some froze, unwilling to believe their sacred hall could be violated. Kalen drew his sword. Seraphine's eyes flared red, and the air around her shimmered with blood magic. Morvana lifted her hand. The throne hall itself responded, obsidian veins glowing faintly in the floor, forming patterns like a living sigil. But the Holophong had come prepared. A robed figure stepped into the open, raising the glowing chalice. The chalice pulsed with sickly light. The sigils in the floor flickered, then dimmed as if suffocating. Morvana's eyes widened, just a fraction. Someone had brought an artifact capable of choking the throne's power. The traitor stood in her court in plain sight. Kalen moved without thinking. He pushed through the chaos toward the robed figure, blade up. A Holophong intercepted him, claws slamming into his sword arm. Pain exploded. He staggered but didn't fall. Seraphine shouted his name, first time she had ever spoken it with fear. Kalen gritted his teeth and drove forward, using his body weight, forcing the Holophong back. He ducked under a snapping jaw and stabbed upward into its mouth. Black blood poured down his arm like hot oil. The Hollow Fang shrieked and fell. Kalen ran toward the robed figure. The traitor turned, and for a heartbeat Kalen saw beneath the hood a vampire face, ancient, eyes hollow with fanatic devotion. The figure whispered a spell. The air thickened, and Kalen felt invisible hands clamp around his throat. He choked, stumbling. The traitor lifted the chalice higher. Seraphine screamed, a sound that cracked like glass. Blood-red energy whipped from her hands, slashing toward the traitor. But the chalice flared, absorbing it. Morvanna stepped down from the throne. For the first time Kalen saw the queen fight. She moved like a shadow given purpose. Her gown flowed, but beneath it was power. She crossed the hall in an instant, appearing beside the traitor as if space had folded for her. Her hand closed around the chalice. The traitor's eyes widened in triumph, then confusion. Morvanna's grip did not burn. It froze. The chalice cracked under her fingers like brittle ice. Red light spilled out in a scream of energy, and the sigils in the floor reignited, brighter than before. The throne's power surged back, and the Hollow Fang recoiled as if struck. Morvanna's voice boomed, not loud but absolute. Enough. The floor erupted with obsidian spikes, spearing through Hollow Fang bodies, pinning them. Black blood sprayed. The creatures shrieked, thrashing. The traitor tried to flee. Morvanna caught the vampire by the throat with one hand, lifting him effortlessly. "Who opened my gates?" she demanded. The traitor spat black blood, laughing. "Not opened. Invited. The throne grows old, Morvanna. Your bloodline is a chain. We will break it." Morvanna's eyes burned. "By killing my daughter." The traitor grinned. "By killing your future." Morvanna's gaze flicked to Kalen, human, sword dripping with black blood, throat marked by invisible strangling hands, still standing. Something passed between them. Calculation. Decision. Then Morvanna snapped the traitor's neck with a single twist. The body fell like discarded cloth. Silence returned in fragments, broken only by the crackle of candles and the wet drip of blood. Kalen breathed hard, throat raw. Seraphine rushed to him, her hands hovering near his face as if afraid to touch. "Kalen." He looked at her. "They wanted you dead." Seraphine nodded, eyes shining with fury and fear. "And they were willing to slaughter my mother's court to do it." Morvanna stepped forward, her gown now spattered at the hem with black blood. She looked at her daughter, then at Kalen. "Now you understand," she said, voice low. "This is not a story. This is succession. This is war." Kalen swallowed. "And I'm your bridge." Morvanna's eyes narrowed. "You are more than that." Then she turned away, issuing orders with cold efficiency. Guards dragged bodies. Servants cleaned blood like it was spilled wine. Nobles whispered behind masks that suddenly felt too thin. And Kalen stood amid the aftermath, realizing the Queen's declaration had been only the beginning. Because now the court had seen him fight. And that meant they would fear him. Or try to kill him again. Morvanna's eyes narrowed. Immortal. Human ideally because your life burns fast. It forces the throne to remain connected to time, to consequence. Seraphine's eyes widened slightly, horror dawning. "Mother, you never told me." Morvanna's expression softened by a fraction. "Because you were young. And because I prayed it would not be necessary." Kalen's voice came out rough. "So the decree wasn't politics. It was ritual." Morvanna did not deny it. Seraphine looked at Kalen, then at the basin, and something like guilt twisted her features. "You saved me, and now you're being used." Kalen stared at her, then at Morvanna. His mind flashed back to the whisper that had summoned him. "Find her. Save her. Or the border burns." He realized with sick certainty, the whisper was not Morvanna's voice. It was the throne's. It had called him. Not as a hero. As an ingredient. Morvanna extended a dagger toward Kalen. The blade was silver black, etched with runes. "If you accept, you will drink from the basin and cut your palm. Your blood will join ours. The throne will recognize you as kin." Kalen's throat tightened. "And if I refuse?" Morvanna's gaze hardened. "Then you may leave, and the pale hunger will hunt you until you die. Because you have already interfered." Seraphine stepped forward suddenly, her voice trembling. "Stop. You cannot force him." Morvanna's eyes snapped to her daughter. "I can. But I would rather he choose. Because a vow taken unwillingly rots." Silence stretched. Kalen looked at Seraphine. He saw the fear in her eyes, not fear of him but fear of what her world did to people. Fear that she would become her mother, a queen who sacrificed pieces to keep the board intact. Kaelin exhaled slowly. I didn't come here wanting a crown, he said. I didn't come here wanting your blood or your politics. He reached for the dagger. But I'm already in this. And if the pale hunger wins, my world burns too. He took the dagger in his right hand. With his left, he held his palm above the basin. Seraphine whispered his name again, softer this time, like a prayer. Kaelin cut. Pain flared, sharp, clean. Blood welled bright red, startlingly alive compared to the dark blood in the basin. He let it drip. The basin reacted immediately. The dark liquid stirred as if waking. Crimson threads swirled upward, wrapping around his blood like tendrils. Morvanna's eyes gleamed. She spoke words in the old tongue. The runes on the wall ignited, casting the chamber in red-black light. Kaelin lifted the basin's cup, carved from obsidian, and drank. The liquid was cold, bitter, metallic. It tasted like grief. It hit his stomach like a stone. Then the world tilted. Kaelin's vision blurred. He swayed. His heartbeat sounded too loud, like drums in his skull. He fell to one knee, gasping. Seraphine caught his shoulder, steadying him. Her hand was cold through his armor, and yet the touch anchored him. He looked up, eyes unfocused. Morvanna's face hovered above him, calm. It is done, she said. The throne knows you. Kaelin's blood burned. Not fever, something deeper. A sensation like invisible chains being fastened around his soul. He heard voices, whispers layered over whispers, old vows, old grief, old hunger. And then, in the center of it, a single clear presence. The obsidian throne. It spoke not in words but in understanding. Bridge. Kaelin clenched his teeth. No, he whispered. Not just Bridge. He felt Seraphine's hand tighten on his shoulder as if she heard him. Morvanna watched him carefully. And for the first time, Kaelin understood what the queen truly was. Not simply a predator monarch but a woman standing at the edge of apocalypse, holding it back with blood and will. The vow had been written. Now the story could only move forward. After the Masquerade massacre, the castle changed. Not in architecture. In mood. Servants stopped whispering. They moved with purposeful silence. Guards doubled in number. Every corridor felt watched. The mist seemed thicker, as if the castle itself was trying to hide wounds. Morvanna summoned Kaelin to a private chamber behind the throne, a room no outsider should see. It was not lavish. It was sacred. The walls were carved with ancient runes that pulsed faintly like veins. In the center stood a stone basin filled with dark liquid, blood but not fresh. It smelled old, like iron and roses left too long in a vase. Seraphine stood beside the basin, expression pale and tight. Morvanna faced them, her red eyes unreadable. The traitor was only a hand, she said. Not the mind. Kaelin's jaw clenched. Then who is the mind? Morvanna's gaze slid to the runes. The Holophong answered to something called the Pale Hunger. An intelligence born in the old experiments that created them. It cannot rule openly, so it uses factions. Cults. Dissatisfied nobles. Those who fear the throne's laws. Seraphine's voice was quiet. They want the throne dead. Morvanna nodded. They want it unbound. They want the night to belong to hunger alone. Kaelin looked at the basin. And where do I fit into this? Morvanna stepped closer, and for the first time her voice carried something like weariness. The obsidian throne is tied to bloodline and vow. My daughter is heir, but the throne requires a counterweight. A mortal anchor. Kaelin felt cold spread through him. A human. The first dream after the vow was not a dream. It was a place. Kaelin stood in a corridor made of black glass, stretching infinitely in both directions. In the walls, reflections moved. Versions of himself wearing crowns of bone, versions of Seraphine with blood on her mouth, versions of Morvanna sitting alone on the throne with her eyes closed like a corpse. The air smelled of iron and old roses. A voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Bridge. Kaelin turned and saw it. Not a body, an idea shaped like hunger. A pale silhouette with too many mouths, each whispering a different promise. The pale hunger. It smiled without warmth. You drank. You joined. You belong. Kaelin's hands clenched. I chose. The silhouette laughed and the corridor trembled. No. The throne chose. Your choice was the illusion that made the chain sweet. Kaelin felt rage flare. He stepped forward anyway. Then I'll make my own chain, he said, voice low. One that cuts you. The pale hunger leaned closer, mouths whispering. The queen will sacrifice you. The daughter will fear you. The throne will consume you. You are mortal. You will crack. Kaelin's breath came hard. Maybe. He looked down at his hands, and saw faint black lines under the skin, like runes forming in his veins. The vow mark. The throne's signature. He raised his head. But before I crack, I'll burn. The corridor shattered. Kaelin woke in his chamber, gasping. Blue fire flickered. Dawn did not exist, but the moonlight was thinner, as if the night had grown tired. He sat up, clutching his chest. Seraphine was there, seated in the chair by the hearth, watching him. She must have been there for hours. Her silver hair was loose, her face stripped of court mask and royal posture. In the firelight she looked younger, almost fragile. You were shaking, she said quietly. You spoke in your sleep. Kaelin swallowed. What did I say? Seraphine's eyes lowered. You said you would burn before you break. Kaelin's throat tightened. He looked at her, truly looked. You shouldn't be here, he said. Seraphine's laugh was soft and bitter. And you shouldn't be in my mother's castle. Yet here we are. Silence stretched. Then Seraphine stood and walked closer, stopping at the edge of his bed as if afraid to cross an invisible boundary. I am sorry, she said. Kaelin frowned. For what? For being the reason you are trapped, she whispered. For being the reason the Holophong came. For being what I am. Kaelin's jaw tightened. He remembered her terror in the broken chamber, the way she had tried to freeze the Holophong with a thread of crimson light. He remembered the way she had steadied him in the ritual chamber. You didn't ask to be hunted, he said. Seraphine's voice cracked. But I am still the prize in their war. Kaelin swung his legs off the bed and stood. The vow mark throbbed faintly in his veins as if the throne listened. Then we stop being prizes, he said. Seraphine stared at him. Kaelin's voice grew steadier, carrying the weight of decision. Your mother thinks she's claiming a human to anchor the throne. The pale hunger thinks it's chaining me to this kingdom. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. But they forgot something. Seraphine whispered, What? Kaelin met her gaze. Humans are good at one thing. He smiled, small and grim. We break gods. Seraphine's breath caught, half fear, half hope. That night, the war stopped being a court intrigue. It became a plan. Kaelin and Seraphine began to investigate quietly, moving through the castle's underways. Old tunnels beneath the chapel, forgotten catacombs, rooms sealed by rune locks. Seraphine knew the secret paths. Kaelin knew how to read tracks and lies. Together, they became something the court had never anticipated. A human and a vampire working as equals. They discovered marks carved into the stone beneath the castle, sigils that matched the chalice's glow. Someone had been preparing a breach long before the masquerade. They found a hidden chapel where vampire priests had once prayed, not to the throne but to hunger. The walls were scratched with desperate lines. Freedom is fangs. The throne is a cage. They found a name repeated over and over in the old tongue. Varys Caldrian, the queen's former advisor, long presumed dead in a border war. Morvanna listened in silence when they brought the evidence. The queen stood before the stained glass windows, moonlight painting her face in fractured colors. For a long time she did not speak. Then softly, I buried him myself. Seraphine's voice trembled. Then how? Morvanna's eyes darkened. Because the pale hunger does not resurrect. It reuses. It wears faces. It wears names. It wears grief. Kaelin felt cold anger tighten his spine. So it's already inside the court. Morvanna turned, gaze sharp. Yes. And now it knows you are not merely an anchor. Her eyes lingered on Kaelin's throat, where faint rune marks pulsed like ink beneath skin. It knows you can reach the throne, she said. And if you can reach it, so can it. Seraphine stepped forward. Then we protect the throne. Morvanna looked at her daughter. Really looked, and for the first time Kaelin saw love naked in the queen's expression. And if protecting it means losing you? Morvanna asked. Seraphine's jaw clenched. Then I will not be a princess. I will be a weapon. Morvanna's gaze shifted to Kaelin. And you, human? My declared son-in-law. My mortal anchor. Kalen's voice was steady. I didn't come here for a wedding. Morvanna's lips twitched, almost amused. No. You came here for war. Kalen nodded. But I'll finish it. The final assault came sooner than expected. On the night the moon went dark, an eclipse that turned the sky into a lid, Noxvera's castle screamed. Not with sound. With magic. The runes in the walls flickered like dying veins. The mist turned thick, choking. Candles snuffed out one by one as if an unseen mouth swallowed flame. In the throne hall, the obsidian throne pulsed, weak, struggling, like a heart being squeezed. And from the floor, cracks spread outward in spiderwebs of black glass. The pale hunger rose. It did not emerge as one monster, but as many hollow-fang bodies crawling from the cracks, dragging themselves into the hall like insects from a broken hive. Above them, the air tore open, forming a pale, floating shape, the silhouette from Kalen's dream now anchored in reality. Morvanna stood before the throne, gown flowing like spilled blood. Her hands were raised, runes blazing around her, holding the breach back with raw force. Seraphine stood beside her mother, eyes glowing, blood magic burning in her veins. Kalen stood in front of both of them, sword drawn, vow marks igniting beneath his skin like living ink. The pale hunger spoke, and the sound was a chorus of mouths. Give me the air. Give me the throne. Give me the bridge. Kalen's grip tightened. He felt the throne behind him, its presence like a storm. It wanted him to kneel, to submit, to become the anchor it demanded. Instead, Kalen did something no vampire expected. He turned, facing the obsidian throne. He stepped closer and placed his hand against its cold surface. The throne's power surged into him like a flood of ice and fire. His vision filled with old battles, old blood, old vows. He saw Morvanna as a young queen kneeling here, cutting her palm. He saw her mother before her. And her mother's mother, and so on, a lineage of women chained to the throne's hunger for stability. Kalen's voice shook with the weight of it. You've taken enough. The throne answered not with words but with pressure, demand, ownership. Kalen bared his teeth. I'm not your tool. He drew the ritual dagger, Morvanna's dagger, now strapped to his belt from the vow ceremony. And he cut his palm again. Fresh blood spilled onto the obsidian. The throne drank greedily. The pale hunger laughed. Morvanna shouted, Kalen, don't. Seraphine reached toward him, eyes wide with fear. Stop. But Kalen didn't stop. He leaned close to the throne and whispered like a man speaking to a beast. I will be your anchor, he said. But not your slave. You will bind to my terms. He pressed his bleeding hand harder, smearing blood across the throne's carved thorns. And my terms are this, Kalen said, voice rising. You will share your power with the air, not consume her. You will protect this kingdom without chaining it to endless sacrifice. Or I will tear you down stone by stone. For a heartbeat, the throne resisted. The air screamed. Kalen felt his bones strain as if the world tried to pull him apart. Then Seraphine stepped behind him. She placed her hand over his bleeding palm, pressing her cold skin against his warm blood. Her eyes flared red. I accept, she whispered, not to the throne but to Kalen. I accept your terms. Morvanna's breath caught. Then the queen did the unthinkable. She stepped forward and placed her hand atop theirs. Her voice was low, trembling with ancient fear and fierce love. I accept, Morvanna said, because I am tired of burying my own daughters. 3 hands. Human air queen. Blood vow will. The throne shuddered. Its obsidian surface cracked, not breaking but opening like an eye forced to see. Power surged outward not as chains but as a wave, violent, luminous, and new. The pale hunger shrieked. The cracks in the floor sealed like wounds closing. The hollow-fang bodies convulsed as if their strings were cut. One by one they collapsed into ash-black sludge, dissolving into nothing. The pale silhouette in the air writhed, mouth screaming. No, this is not. Kalen lifted his sword, now glowing faintly with obsidian red light. He pointed it at the pale hunger. You said I would crack, Kalen said, voice echoing through the hall like a narrator's final line in a film. He stepped forward. Maybe. But tonight, you break. He thrust the sword upward. The blade pierced the pale silhouette like a stake through fog. For a moment nothing happened. Then the pale hunger screamed, not in pain but in loss. It began to unravel, its mouths dissolving into ash, its silhouette fragmenting into pale dust that the throne's power devoured like fire-eating paper. And then it was gone. Silence flooded the hall. Candles relit, one by one, as if the castle exhaled. The mist thinned. Moonlight returned, pale and gentle, filtering through stained glass like forgiveness. Kalen staggered, collapsing to his knees. Seraphine caught him this time, arms around his shoulders, holding him like he was something precious. Morvanna stood above them, breathing hard, rare human. Her mask of invincibility was cracked, and beneath it was a woman who had just gambled her kingdom on the will of a mortal. Kalen looked up at the queen, voice hoarse. "Is it over?" Morvanna's lips curved into the faintest smile. "For tonight," she said. Seraphine laughed softly, a sound of relief and disbelief. Her forehead rested briefly against Kalen's. In that moment, the title's decree, "You will be my son-in-law human," no longer felt like a chain. Felt like a doorway. Not to romance in a fairy tale sense, but to a new kind of alliance. One forged in violence, choice, and shared refusal to be consumed by old laws. Weeks later, the castle held another gathering. Not a masquerade. A council. Human envoys arrived at the bridge, careful, terrified, carrying white banners. Vampire nobles watched from arches, tense but curious. Morvanna did not sit above them like a distant god. She stood on the same level as the mortals. Seraphine stood at her right hand. Kalen stood at her left. The bridge was visible through the open gates behind them, stretching toward the forest, toward the human world. Morvanna spoke to both sides. "The night will not rule the day," she said. "And the day will not hunt the night. Not anymore." She looked at Kalen, human anchor, vow-marked bridge. "And the proof stands here," she said. A mortal who was claimed and who chose to redefine the claim. Kalen felt Seraphine's hand brush his, brief, private. Not ownership. Agreement. In the months that followed, rumors spread across both kingdoms. The vampire queen had bound a human to her line. The heir walked with him. The castle gates opened more often. Border raids diminished. The Holofang cults were hunted down in secret tunnels and forgotten chapels. And sometimes in quiet hours, Kalen would stand in the glass garden with Seraphine, watching black roses bloom under moonlight. "You still hate the decree?" Seraphine asked one night, voice soft. Kalen thought of the vow marks in his veins, the throne's ancient hunger, the pale hunger's laughter. Then he looked at Seraphine, silver hair like moonlight, red eyes no longer only predator but person. "I hate what it was meant to be," Kalen said. "A chain." Seraphine's lips curved faintly. "And what is it now?" Kalen exhaled, the night air cold in his lungs. "A promise," he said, "that neither of us will be used again." Seraphine's gaze held his. In the distance, the obsidian throne pulsed quietly, not as a tyrant, but as a heart learning a new rhythm. And beyond the stained glass, the moon rose, whole again, watching two worlds that had finally begun to negotiate with fate instead of submitting to it.